Hey ladies, so today I have something special for you. We're changing it up. I have been going back, well not me, my amazing team has been going back and asking some of the other podcasts that I've actually been on if we could utilize that interview on Mama's in Control. So throughout the weeks to come, you may hear some interviews that I've done in the past with other people. So let's dive into today's episode. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
Resistance, burnout, procrastination, sleepless nights, stress, and painful hard work. Fatigued from running on the high achiever hamster wheel? This is the Bold Leadership Revolution, where we develop high-performing leaders to live, thrive, and lead bold and smart, not hard. Here is your host, Tara Newman.
Hey, bold leaders. Welcome to another episode of the Bold Leadership Revolution podcast. And today we have with us a very special guest, and her name is Heather Chauvin. Heather's known for teaching driven, ambitious mothers how to find alignment and avoid burnout in a simple and relatable manner. She speaks from her personal experience as a mother of 3 boys, wife, and spiritual learnings from her stage 4 cancer diagnosis in 2013. Heather has been featured as a TEDx speaker. Dying to be a Good Mother is her TEDx, and has been featured in Huffington Post, CTV, the OWN Network, podcasts, and radio all around. I very rarely take on guests on this podcast. However, knowing Heather the way I do, knowing her message the way I do, knowing my audience the way I do, I felt like it was imperative to have her as a guest on this podcast and to share her story and the lessons that she's learned along the way. So I hope you really enjoy this. I had a great time talking to Heather. She's amazing. Go check her out.
Hey, Heather. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Bold Leadership Revolution podcast.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you.
So I wanted you to come on the podcast. I want to be in full transparency that I do not take guests usually that are outside of my community or not a client. This is a solo podcast. However, there's always once in a while that somebody comes along that has a message that is so powerful that I think really needs to reach my audience. And you are someone who I've heard your story. I've watched your TED Talk. You and I have connected through social media and through Zoom. And I really want you to come on this podcast and share your story and share some of the advice and wisdom you have for mothers and women today around leadership, around life, around business. So can you start off by telling us your story?
Yes. So I'm like, where do you want me to start our stories? Isn't it funny how I find a lot of times we're like, oh, no big deal. It's just a story. But realizing that we are leaders. What I truly believe without a doubt is that motherhood is a leadership role, and we need to start owning that. So I'm going to start my story goes way back, but I'm going to start when I became a mother. So I have 3 boys. They're 14, 9, and 6. And so it was 14 years ago when I looked at my son for the first time and had this aha moment, more of like a holy shit moment, but it was this aha moment of, for whatever reason, something clicked inside of me, and it was like, I need to become the person that I most desire you to be. And I have goosebumps just saying that right now. And from that moment, so I was 18 when I had my son, when I became a mother. From that moment, I knew I was already a statistical disaster, right? And in my mind, I just kept visualizing. And my mantra at the time, I didn't even know what a mantra was I did not want to become a teen pregnancy statistic. And I just kept going and going. What do I want him to pursue? What do I want him to be? And the craziest thing was that I was giving myself permission to do all of the things that were deep within me. Mm-hmm. But now my why was bigger, right? It was beyond me. And this was the first time in my life that my why was beyond me, that I had like a bigger purpose. So I'm doing all of these things. I'm #hustling. We could talk about that later, but relationship with hustle. And I'm go, go, go. I put myself through university when I, didn't even have the credits to go, got a social work degree, fell in love with child development and mental health and mindfulness. I started meditating because I wanted my son to meditate because I thought it was his problem. And I was projecting all of my fear, all of my anxiety onto him. And I was like, you're angry. You're anxious. You need to meditate. And it was the first time I realized this whole theory of like projection and mirroring. And I'm like, oh, I'm projecting my fears onto you. Okay, I get this now. So he really cracked me open to this possibility of like spiritual development. Had no idea what it was. So then I decided to leave my corporate job as a social worker. Every day I would go to work, and there was two things that happened to me. One, I could always feel my soul was like slowly leaving my body. And I started looking at my friends and colleagues, and, the conversations that we would have about people and clients and cases, there was no emotional attachment anymore. And I could feel this like sadness. I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone can't see it, but like, they're so disconnected. And it's like trauma, right? They're so disconnected from like making a difference in the world. And I would also always see people labeling children, but never getting to the root cause. Like, oh, this child is behavioral. This child is this. And I was like, yeah, no shit. Like, look at what they've been through. Like, do they not have coping strategies? Like, this is your job to teach them. So I took this passion and desire, and I kind of went online and went through that world of, I'm a little bit of a rebel too. So blazing my own path. So 5 years ago, and I was doing this about 7-8 years ago, and I'm building my business, and you'll figure out why I'm laughing in a second. Building my business, absolutely loving what I do, but I wasn't giving myself full permission to like go all in. It wasn't a business at that point. It was an expensive hobby. And my husband was okay with that because, as long as I paid for the groceries and I had a few $100s around Christmas time, like we were good. Who needs vacations? Who needs extra clean underwear? Like, it's okay. You got to wear them until like the holes wear out. Right?
We're actually going to bookmark this for later down the line, but go on.
Okay, perfect. The holy underwear?
Yeah, the whole concept.
Okay, cool. Okay. Because I'm like, I got more underwear stories. I should tell you about the time I actually borrowed underwear from my friend because I wouldn't even go shopping for myself, because this is how much I was neglecting my own needs. So then 5 years ago, as I'm building my online coaching business and so passionate about what I do, my whole business was focused around child. Let's transform the child. And women would say things to me like, I don't have time for this. I can't implement these tools and strategies with my children. And there was just little flags here and there. And so we would work on those things, but the light bulb did not go off. So at this time, my youngest, who's now 6, was a year old. I'm breastfeeding. I'm literally doing all these consult calls. My body is sending me signs and symptoms chronically. Like, stop, Heather.
How old are you here?
Stop. So I was 27 at the time, 33 now. 20. I'm an old soul in a younger body. Finally, in the last 5+ years, I'm like, okay, all my friends are older than me. But growing up, I always felt like light years ahead of people. Mm-hmm. So, I was 27 at the time, and my body is just like, I'm not doing well. I'm lethargic. I'm chronically overwhelmed, exhausted, all of these things. But every time I sought professional help, the feedback I would receive is, this is just a phase. Just a phase. It's normal. You're a mom of young children. This is fine. You're running a business. You're trying to do this. So I'm like, okay, this is normal. Literally physicians telling me this. It's normal. It's normal. Or they're like, try to get some rest, go for a little walk, drink a green smoothie. So I'm like, all right, I'm doing all this. Go to yoga, whatever. my abdomen is swollen at this point. And I send a picture, I take a picture in front of the mirror and I send it to my sister, who's a physician. She doesn't live around me, so I don't see her very often. And her first response is, go to the emergency room immediately. And I'm like, all right, there she goes freaking out again. Like, maybe I have a gluten allergy. I don't know. My first thought is, I don't have time to figure this out. Like, I don't have time. I have a life. I know I'm going to be sitting there forever. It's going to be test after test, and nobody is going to tell me anything. So I'm just not even going to bother. Finally, the pain got so bad as my abdomen continued to swell and swell, went to a clinic, and they thought like my appendix had erupted or something, but there was no pain there. They're like, Heather, if this gets worse, you need to go to the emergency room. So I'm like, oh, fine, these people are overreacting. Finally, I go to the emergency room. I left the first time because I'm staring at everybody I'm like, I'm not bleeding. Like, why am I here? Why am I here? I'm like, I'm not in that much pain. So I left. The next day I came back with my husband. He said, I am not leaving you here. I'm going to physically hold your hand and keep you here until you are seen. You want to know the creepy part? Okay, this is where the fun part happens. I go in, I get a CT of my abdomen, routine blood work, and they're waiting for me. And the nurse comes in and then her energy, her whole demeanor changes. And I was like, shit, there's something going on. Like, I could just tell it in the air. I can tell the energy has shifted. The doctor walks in and we're a few hours in and she looks at me. She said, Heather, based on your CT, you have tumors growing all over your abdomen. And based on that and your blood work and your age, you have cancer. We know you have cancer. We just don't know what type of cancer or how the progression of it.
But it must have been so far along, because they say, like, by the time you feel pain, or like, heck, your abdomen's bloated. Yeah. I mean, you must have been pretty far along.
Well, it was stage 4 at that point. And the creepy part is I already knew. Like, the second she told me, it was confirmation. It's confirmation. It's like when you're pregnant, you're having a boy, and then they tell you it's a boy or a girl or whatever. Like, it's the female intuition. I just wasn't listening to it.
When do you think you knew?
Months before. I even said weird things to my husband, and he's like, do you remember telling me that? And I'm like, no. But my brain was so not there. Like, I was in burnout mode. I was chronically, like, it was just ridiculous how much I was neglecting myself. I was barely eating because I didn't know how to eat. I was like, this isn't organic. I can't eat it. I don't know what to eat. Like, I was just so overwhelmed. I feel like I was sick for years and years before. So when I was finally diagnosed, of course, I was in a crisis state. I had stage 4 sporadic Burkitt's. So Burkitt's, it's a lymphoma. So Burkitt's it's like a dormant, it's a rapid growing cancer, but like I'm not an expert on this by any means, but it's like, it could be dormant in your body. And then once it's active, it's just very fast growing. The positive of that is it's very receptive to chemo. So I was Googling all holistic ways. I had to surrender to Western medicine, right? When you're in this holistic alternative world or personal development, people were literally giving me every article on how, I could tell you it all. These things are going to save my life. And I'm like, yes, but when you're already in a crisis state, this isn't being proactive. Like, hello, people. So I surrendered. I did traditional chemo, and that was a whole spiritual growth development in itself. But because the tumors were so rapid growing, chemo was very, very receptive. And so at that time, I just remember that night when I walked out of the hospital and, she said, you have cancer. I remember walking out, it was December 21st, and where I live, it should have been snowing, but it was raining. And I looked up in the sky and I said, I don't know who or what I'm talking to. You finally have my attention. Mm-hmm. And I walked slower to the car. I just, time stopped, and I looked around and I was like, why am I in such a rush? Why am I not paying attention to my life? Why am I go, numbing myself out? And that's where everything changed in my business, in the way I feel, the way interactions in my relationships, my message, my impact, how I show up every single day in my life, who I interact with. It was a transformational moment.
The reason why I ask you to share is because I think when we share our stories, it's so powerful for others because they can borrow from our stories. And what I want people to take away from your story is that it's time to wake up. It's time to wake up. Like, I have this deep fear and belief that leaders today are an endangered species, that we are burning out at rapid and alarming rates. And it's, while we think that it's society's demands, and while we think it's the Facebook algorithm and the red notifications that elicit a brain response from us that create these addictions to social media or distraction or whatever, right? The attention economy that we're living in, that we all have so much choice and discernment in this moment. So I know that there are people who are like, okay, Tara, but how's this my wake up call? I don't have cancer. And you and I were talking before we got on here, and you had such a great response to people who say this to you.
Well, I think everyone has their cancer in their life. So a lot of women who are attracted to me come to me because one of their pain points is parenting. Like, they truly feel like they're failing as a mother, or they're just like, I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed. It might be a relationship. It could be money. Like, we all have those things in our life that when you're avoiding something, it will just explode in your face eventually to get your attention. And so I've said to people, like, this is your cancer diagnosis. What are you going to do about it? And of course, we have that fight or flight response in anything in life. And I remember being so scared, so afraid of judgment, like fear of failure, but really it's like the fear of success or something. But when I was backed into the corner, this is the craziest part. I grew up with this sense of like extremely low self-esteem, whatever you want to say. Like, I had no confidence. I had no motivation or perseverance. And I was just like, what's the point of life? What's the point of living? And I really had no motivation to figure that out. When my son came along, I knew I had to figure it out. It was like another spark ignited me. But when I was pushed against the wall, and my biggest fear, right, which is most human fear, the fear of death, right, or fear of loss, I was like, you need to figure out how to live. You literally need to figure out how to feel alive. This is not about, purchasing a course that is about finding your purpose. This is about how do you energize yourself and feel alive when you have no energy because you just went through 4 ridiculous rounds of chemo. You're bald. You can barely keep your eyes open. You have 3 boys who need you. You have a husband who literally is staring at you going, I can't do this by myself. And you need them to show up. How do you do that and feel alive? And that was where it was transformational in kind of the whole aspect of leadership to me, especially now I'm on this I never connected to like feminism before for some reason, maybe because I grew up with like a single mom who, worked. I have no idea. I was like, oh yeah, it was this weird thing. And now I'm like, ladies, where is this oppression coming from? Like, why don't you think you can have what you want? Why do you not think you can create the space for yourself? Why do you feel that you need to ask everybody for permission before you wipe your ass or literally leave your house or go on vacation by yourself or say, no, I'm not cooking that meal, or I am not doing this, or I'm not doing that? And I realized that so much of where I got myself is I did not think I was worthy of literally feeling alive and energized. And and looking back, I'm like, well, my mother didn't feel like that. My grandmother didn't feel like that. Her grandmother. I'm like, this is a female lineage coming from generation to generation. And it's my responsibility. One, I've been gifted this opportunity. I still have optimal time. My health is like beyond what it's ever been. I feel amazing. And I know myself now more than I ever have. It is my responsibility as a human being who feels called to lead in a certain way. That is leadership. And it is selfish of me not to teach that.
I can resonate with what you were saying so much. And a matter of fact, you said something in your TED talk about how you were in the hospital bed and you were trying to connect to what you wanted. And you sat down and you just started asking yourself, like, what do I want? What do I desire? What do I crave? And that resonated with me so much, is because women and wanting are in such conflict. I have experienced this myself. The book, Think and Grow Rich, chapter 2, I laugh about this all the time. Chapter 2 is desire. I shut the book. I'm like, I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I don't desire what? And it was such a sticking point for me that I have a daily journaling practice around asking myself the question, what do you want? Because I need to get clarity on that. And it's a practice and it's a habit that I've had to create, because once I actually started wanting things was when my business exploded. When I had desire that went beyond like what was right in front of me, superficial or anything like that, was really when my business exploded. And I can remember the moment in my life where I shut wanting down. And I really had to go back and I had to heal that. And some of the things that you were writing that you wanted were so profound to me.
Like a bath?
Yeah. Do you remember, share that? You wanted hair.
Yes. I actually wanted to shave my head before I lost my hair. And I wanted to dye my hair purple. So this is okay. So I always tell people I desire, I crave, and I'll make my clients and women in general. It's like, do this for yourself. Just take out pen and paper, pull over the side of the road. If you're listening to this while you're driving, like, you have time, it takes 2 minutes, and you're like, and I would just say, I want a bath, like immediate things, right? So right now in this moment, I would say, I want to stretch. I want to go for a walk. I was going to say, I want to have like a really juicy conversation with someone, but I feel like that's happening right now in this moment. And you just ask yourself, like, I want a glass of water, and then giving yourself permission to like dream bigger. I want to travel the world. I know it's not really a bucket list, but my I want or desire list is to travel long periods of time with my children and to figure out global schooling and homeschooling. I don't want to be traditional, but it's like, it is a desire that's like on my heart right now. And so I just keep feeding into that. Like, what is that? What is that? What is that? But if I shut it down, I'm not going to be able to manifest it. It's not going to come true. And it's just going to sit there dormant, and it's going to sit inside of me. But I would say things like, yes, I want hair. I want to be able to walk. I want to be able to stay awake for longer than 5 minutes. I want to be able to cuddle with my children. I want to be able to make a meal. I remember, picking my kids up from school for the first time was like, oh my gosh, that was a field trip in itself. I remember going out to dinner with my husband on a date night. And I walked into this restaurant for the first time. First time I was out in public. And I was so overwhelmed, I started to cry. And he's like, what are you crying at? What are you crying about? And I said, you have no idea how much you take for granted being able to be out in public. And he was like, I don't get it. And I said, you never will, hopefully. But in this moment, I have such deep gratitude because I've experienced the opposite. And this is when I started shifting my work with parents and women. I'm like, what do you want? What is that relationship? How do you want to feel? This is the thing too. It's not what you want. I learned this from Danielle Laporte, the desire map. It's not what you want. It's not the big house that you want. It's not the money that you want. It's the feeling that you think it's going to give you, which is why you get the big house or the money and you're like, I'm not happy. So I started diving into like desire. I want these things, but why do I want them? Because it's going to make me feel pretty. It's going to make me feel secure. It's going to make me this. It's going to make me that. And then I started asking myself, like, one of my core desired feelings at the time was strong or connected. What can I do right now in this moment to feel strong? What can I do to feel connected? So with my boys, it was, I'm going to turn the TV off and I'm just going to put my, cell phones, to be honest, weren't that big back then. Instagram wasn't, so I wasn't addicted to it as much. But like I put my phone away and it was like, let's just be right here, me and you kids. I also noticed things like everyone wanting to take my children away from me to help me. And they would voice like, I just want to be with you. So that was cultivating and creating connection, feeling strong. It was like, get up, Heather, take a shower, like just something little. So I tried to feed the feeling that I desired instead of like that material outer goal or subject or item that I was trying to achieve. Does that make sense?
Makes 100% sense. I think that that's a disconnect for people. I think they feel like their desire has to be a thing. It's something that I have definitely struggled with. I'm kind of more of a minimalist. And I consider myself a servant leader. Like I'm really lit up by serving others and seeing others succeed and seeing others' businesses grow and watching people really own things for themselves and be bold in their leadership. And it's not about me. It's about that feeling of watching that connecting with that essence of others. So it was really hard for me, especially in the online space where so much is about material, like the men with the Lamborghini lifestyle or the women with.
Yeah. I haven't seen your photos yet. Your branded perfect photos of you on your Lamborghini yet.
Or like women who are like in front of the Eiffel Tower with their macaroons or whatever it is that they're doing. And like, so it's so disconnected for me. Because the things that I want are actually feelings. And I tell people that I write my vision every day. And I was reading my vision to somebody to give them an example. And I realized my vision wasn't about any one particular thing. It was like feelings and embodiment and essence and those things that I want. And it's squishy and it's intangible. And I think that's probably why people have a hard time connecting with it.
You know what I find funny about this conversation, which is probably why we connect, being in the online space as well. I said, I will never call myself a business coach. I will call myself a leadership coach. But I got into this because of my love and passion of helping children feel amazing in their own body and mind. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like that is what, keeps me going. But in order to do that, I have to get a parent present. I have to, help them see and understand where their children are coming from, which is going against a current of in the parenting culture. And then it's going against the current of, how women and motherhood is. And then I see this like helping people really manage their fear, because I'll see so many people say, oh, can you help me do this? Can you help me do that? And I'm like, yes, I can. But you're not, you don't have a couch to 60K program. And I'm like, no, but you can get those results when you are driving your inner leadership, like when you are cultivating who you want to be. Mm-hmm. But it's not about selfies every day. It's not about go, 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 hustle, 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 because I work with so many people and I know so many people who, yes, you've manifested the money, you've made the money, you have, checked off those, where you've gotten the PR or the whatever, and you're still not satisfied. And it's because you're so disconnected from your message, your impact. Like, why did you start this? And when you go to bed at night thinking like, am I failing as a mother? You're so disconnected from your inner values. And I think you and I are both seeing a shift in the conversation, especially in the online world, of people reading through the BS and starting to see like they want authenticity and they want people who have gotten the results that they're seeking, not people who are like, hey, I started my business last week and now I'm going to teach you to do the same thing. It's truly about experience and living through that, and then showing someone like, this is what worked for me. Doesn't necessarily, I find for so many women, I'm not teaching them. Like, I know people come in and, they think they're going to get one thing and they get something else, but too often I'm teaching people how to trust their own instincts. Like, here's my template. Like, this is what works for me. What part of this feels good to you and what doesn't? Now, the part that doesn't, make it your own, and always trust your gut.
Yeah, I think that we have managed to brainwash people into believing that they need a blueprint or a formula. And that is incredibly detrimental and harmful to business owners, because at some point there's not a goddamn blueprint for cancer. There's not a fucking blueprint for bankruptcy. There was no formula for me on how to move through that, how to navigate that. There was no formula for you on how to navigate what you were going through that required leadership, which is not purely a logical experience. It is an emotional and spiritual experience. And it's one that requires both critical thinking and embodiment.
I love that you say that, because I remember it was this like balance. Oh, I don't even like the word balance. It was the alignment between trusting the healthcare practitioners that I was surrounded with, where I didn't have control over that, while trying not to be over controlling, like trying to surrender, but thinking outside of the box. Like, I remember when my oncologist was like, your treatment is done, go home. And I said, are you kidding me? Like, what's my next step? Like, what's the recovery process? Oh, we don't deal with that, nor do we refer you to anybody. But because I was already advocating for myself and taking that ownership, I was already seeking, like, how do I restore my body, physically? I remember telling my oncologist, I want to run a marathon. Never ran a marathon in my life, but I thought, heck, if I can go through this, I can go through anything. And it seems like a bucket list thing that people do after they go through a disease or illness. For whatever reason, I was just giving myself permission. It was on my I want list. I want to run a marathon. I said, if I start running, is my cancer going to come back? Like, I was so afraid. And she looked at me. She's like, I don't know. Like, just go do it. And I was so afraid. I had to figure out how to move through that fear. But really, I had to figure out how to trust myself again. I had to not only trust myself again, to learn how to trust myself for the first time in areas that I wasn't willing to, that I can actually do this, even if it scares me. Who cares? You can walk the whole marathon. Like, just show up to the starting line, just like one foot in front of the other. You'll cross the finish line eventually. And then when I showed up, I realized, like, I was running with all the 80-year-olds, and I'm like, guys, they showed up to the race. And I realized that's what life is all about. It's just about showing up and going, I don't know what I'm doing, but I said yes because it was a desire and I'm going to do it. And I had that inner calling. So I trusted that instinct and I just took action.
Jesse Itzler, Sarah Blakely's husband, he talks about foot in the door, figure it out later. And I love that. Like, I quote that all the time. Just like, Tara, just get your foot in the door and figure it out later. Because so many people stay waiting and stuck for that perfect moment.
My husband says fire. I always like fire and then aim. I shoot something. I just do it backwards all the time. And he's like, you always make it happen. I'm like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, seriously, what's the worst that's going to happen? He's like, you shoot and then you aim. And I'm like, yep. We're going to figure it out. I
think that I always have to give my bias when I give my perspective on things, because I think that's healthy. And I don't want anybody to misconstrue what I'm saying. I take a great amount of responsibility for the fact that I podcast and that I put a message out there. And so I always give the bias that, like, when I look at things and go, what's the worst that can happen? I go bankrupt. I lose everything. Like, I've already done that. And you have a similar thing. Like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm on death's door. Like, you've been there.
And failing at something I was watching your story the other day and you were talking about failure. It's like failing at something is part of the process. But when you're so afraid of it, like what's the biggest, your biggest fear of dying or fear of something bad happening to someone you love. And you're like, who cares if I throw a noodle at the wall and it doesn't stick? I just figure it out. Like you put a Facebook post up or a Facebook live and people don't like it or they make fun of you. Who cares? They're going to forget about it in like 7 to 10 days anyways.
Yeah.
And really they're not even looking because they're
It took me a while to figure that out, but yes.
They're so into their own head. They're just like, oh my God, how do I look? I could never do that.
Yeah. I want us to, we're going to touch really briefly before we wrap it up, only because I'm sitting at lunch with my mother the other day and she says something and it was a Heather moment. So I wrote it down. I want to read to you what she said and you're going to be like, oh my gosh. So she says, women make some money and then say that's enough. They set such a lower bar for their financial worth than men do, and then expect so much more of themselves. You just had a rant about this on your Instagram.
I feel like I rant about this all the time. I was at a retreat. I was hosting a retreat last weekend, and I will often hear this from women, like, my job pays a lot. I should be satisfied. I have the partner, I have the children, I have the money, the career. I should be happy. And Byron Katie, if you know who Byron Katie is, she's amazing. She always says, stop shooting all over yourself. But I think too often it's like, why is that okay? Why is that enough? My biggest lesson in this was when I was like, oh, I'm making it. I'm okay. I'm making enough money. And then the second I was diagnosed, I was like, shit, I have no money to pay for any of my recovery, like any of it. I have nothing to pay these extra bills. So again, it's coming back to that analogy of like your cup needs to run over in abundance. Why? You can give so much more when you have more. So why do we put this pressure on ourselves, like mental pressure? It's all inner pressure that we put on ourselves of what we are required to put out into the world, but then we limit and block what we receive. And so that is how like life works, right? Everything is cyclical. Like if you look at any natural system, it's all a cycle. But yet when this giving and receiving is a cycle as well, and when we're giving, and we're not receiving, hello, of course there's going to be a disconnect. Of course you're going to get sick. Of course you're going to feel like not enough. So to me, it's an epidemic. And I think as women, we need to start asking ourselves why and be brave enough and bold enough to start changing that system and to start bringing the cycle back. And then when people ask you, well, why are you doing that? Or, oh, must be nice. Then you can just give them an invitation to look at their limiting beliefs as well.
Yeah. So my son right now is like, he's 13. He's really close to your kid's age. And he's really excited to be starting a little business with his friend. And I ran into the mom, his friend's mom at school the other night. And she said to me, because I work from home and she doesn't, she works for somebody else. And she's, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. He seems like always at your house. Is that okay? And I'm like, first of all, I'm always home. It's okay. Like, that's why I do this. It's the life I chose. It's what I created. For this very reason. And she was like, you're like, it's so amazing. And that he comes home and he tells me like what you're teaching them. And cause I'm obviously helping them set up this business, right? At my kitchen table, we're doing little lessons. And, I was telling her about a retreat that I led, and I'm very fucking unapologetic about the money I make, about the service I deliver, about how I show up and how I lead in the world, not because I'm an asshole, but because I want other women to see what is possible for them. It's so important that I not dull my shine, to use a term that's probably a little overused, so that they can see if they choose to. And she chose to. She was like, that's amazing. That retreat sounds amazing. Like, I can't believe you get to go and do that for work, right? and she wasn't like, I don't know who you think you are. In that moment, she thought twice about the choices that she makes for herself and what she's going to claim for herself. She didn't say that to me, but I know that she's walking away with a sliver of what's possible for her to step into if and when she chooses to step into it.
Yeah. And it can just be the subtlest shifts, right? Like, oh, so many women I talk to about putting boundaries around their time. And especially if you're an employee, productivity, you don't need to be there 40 hours a week. I'm sorry. And it's a whole other conversation. I've had few with women already, and they just ask for what they want and they get it. Like, oh, I got Fridays off. Oh, I get to leave an hour earlier. And, I told my boss it was a 90-day trial, and they were happy because my productivity was even better. It's like, your value is not on your time. It's not dollar per hour. And it's so beautiful to see that when you become your potential, like you give yourself permission to step into that, everyone around you is affected. Of course, you're going to trigger people, right? People might not be as open to receiving.
That's a gift. You triggering somebody else is a gift, because that trigger is like the rainbow leading to a pot of gold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, you're going to have that as well. And the people that are willing to look at their triggers and say, wow, I have something to work on, rather than blaming and shaming, you don't want those people around you anyways. When you become who you were born to be, and it feels light and it feels in alignment, and you're like, I love this. I love waking up every morning. I love going to bed. This is easy. Of course, we're all going to have resistance and responsibilities, but when there's a more state of flow in your life, it doesn't matter how many children you have, how many businesses you run, just please understand that there is possibility for change. And when you become that, you just sprinkle that stuff all over, and people are like, yes, yes, yes. You're showing them what is possible for them.
Yeah. I want to wrap us up because I want to be respectful of everybody's time involved. But I like leaving my podcast listeners with something that's actionable that they can take away from this episode, and maybe in 15 minutes receive some kind of a result. I have an idea. Do you have an idea of what we can leave them with?
Well, I was going to say the I want
yes,
list.
that was my idea.
You're like, yay, I'm reading your mind. We're on the same wavelength. Simply just write down on a piece of paper, I want. And if want is too strong of a word for you, put I desire or I crave. Give yourself, put on a timer, 3 to 5 minutes, and just write, free flow, write every thought, every word that comes to your mind. And then to challenge yourself to see if this actually works, just pick one of those things and circle it and make it happen ASAP. It could be a glass of water. It could be a bubble bath, anything. You have to ask and create space for it in your life, and then just repeat that process about 1 million times and you're good to go.
I want to add to this because I know my people and your people, and I want to say, don't overthink it. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't make it mean something. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You can't screw this up, right? We work with similar.
What else are we missing?
Seriously.
Your husband will be okay with it.
Yeah, it's all good. So, and I would love, and I know that Heather would love to hear what is on your want list. And I know Heather and I both hang out pretty regularly over on Instagram. I'm at the Tara Newman, and Heather is at Moms in Control.
Mom is in control.
Mom is in control. At Mom is in control. Where else can they find you?
So like you said, Instagram, my podcast, Mom is in Control podcast. I'm doing a 365-day podcast. So a daily podcast this year. It was a big, bold choice on my my end to do that. But the reason why I did it was because I have to hit submit and I have to create content, and I cannot overthink it, Tara. I just have to do it and put it out there. The feedback has been tremendous. I give a lot of strategic, quick action steps, and pull back the layers on parenting and business and life in general. So yeah, you can find me iTunes, Spotify, anywhere. And that's mainly where I'm hanging out, or my website, which is just heatherchauvet.com.
It's a great podcast. I highly recommend it. Thanks for coming on today, Heather.
Thanks, Tara.
Now, if this conversation was interesting to you and felt unique and a little different, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to take me up on my invitation to join the Brave Society. So if you're a female small business owner, this is likely your community if you're resonating with this podcast and the things we're talking about over here, because they are very much the essence of how we talk about things in the Brave Society. The Brave Society was founded on 3 basic principles. 1, community. How can we come together and become a marketplace of business owners where we can do business together, where we can open doors for each other, where we can collaborate with like-minded, credible business owners? 2, nobody should ever shortchange their leadership development. I see too many times women spread thin, making investments in their businesses as they grow and shortchanging their leadership development. And I'm here to solve that problem. You can make the investments that you need to make in, say, your marketing or your branding or your website, and develop yourself as a leader. And the third thing that we come together for is to really stand at the pinnacle of our leadership, which John Maxwell talks a lot about in his work. And he says that we're at the pinnacle of our leadership when we are a leader who develops leaders who develops leaders. And what I ask the women of the Brave Society to do is to take what they learn in the Brave Society and bring it into the world, into their communities, into their families, to their clients and their customers, and to really continue to develop more leaders on this planet. If this sounds interesting to you, I want you to go over to the show notes and click on the link, or you can come find me on Instagram. I'm at the Tara Newman, and ask me any questions you need to about joining the Brave Society. If you found this podcast valuable, help us develop more bold leaders in the world by sharing this episode with your friends, colleagues, and other bold leaders. Also, if you haven't done so already, please leave a review. I consider reviews like podcast currency, and it's the one thing you can do to help us out here at the Bold Leadership Revolution HQ. We would be so grateful for it. Special thanks goes to Stacey Harris from Uncommonly More, who is the producer and editor of this podcast. Go check them out for all your digital marketing and content creation needs. Be sure to tune into the next episode to help you embrace your ambition and leave the grind behind.
Thank you for tuning in to the Bold Leadership Revolution podcast. This episode has ended, but our work continues online. Head over to theboldleadershiprevolution.com, where you'll find links to any resources mentioned in today's episode, along with other valuable tips and information that will help you lead bold. That's theboldleadershiprevolution.com.